Have you heard the advice that you should stay together for the sake of the children? Well, in and of itself, it sounds really good, but it's not complete advice. I'm Leslie Dories, your marriage coach, creator of the Hero Husband Project, and owner of Foundations Coaching. Now, the truth of the matter is the best thing that you can do for your children is to take care of their parents' marriage, meaning your marriage. So the idea of staying together for the sake of the children is not bad on the surface. It's just if your marriage isn't what you want it to be, then that it's not enough just to have a long marriage. You want to have a good marriage. Because the truth of the matter is, your children are watching you. They are learning what a adult relationship, romantic relationship is. And if you are giving them a bad example, meaning maybe you fight a lot, or maybe you actually go quiet. A friend of mine was talking about um, in her parents' marriage, when they would fight or they'd have an argument, things would go silent for days. I'm not talking minutes, I'm not talking hours, I'm like talking days. And it really impacted her because the kids were walking around on eggshells. They didn't know what to do. And so she took this into her marriage. And so when her husband would want to talk to her about something serious, she'd shut down. And he came up with this really great way of dealing with it, in that he would continue to have the conversation and he'd play both parts. And he'd eventually get her involved in the conversation, because what she would say is, well, I wouldn't say that. And so then he'd ask her, well, what would you say? And that would enable them to have the conversation. But if she had married somebody else who didn't have that skill, who didn't have that thought to bring her into the conversation in a inviting and healthy way, she would have repeated the same mistakes that her parents were making. And by the way, that's what we all do. We do what we know. You do what you know. You do what you learned from your parents. So if your parents fought a lot, you probably fight. I have a client whose grandfather and father were ragers. And so he learned this is what you do with your emotion. And you just let it all hang out. And and I actually did some of that myself. I actually, when I when I would lose my temper, it would be like everybody hit the ground because the flamethrower's coming. And and luckily I had a husband very much like my friend did, who he basically said to me one day, when you get upset, could you please take a different approach? And he didn't do it. He didn't say that while I was upset, but I realized the damage that I was doing. And so just being in a long marriage isn't enough. Staying together for the sake of the children, well, it's a great idea, right? And we want to have our children to be coming from a solid place. But it's not solid if you guys aren't having a good marriage, if you aren't showing your children how to handle conflict well, how to be physically affectionate with each other, how to do these things. And so, I frequently am asked, um, is it a good idea, to stay together for the sake of the children? And I said, well, the children are a good motivator for you to make your relationship better, but it's not okay just to stay together, because a lot of times what people do, and this is the next video I'm going to be talking about, is they just kind of go underground with their feelings. They just go, okay, I just have to white knuckle this, and I'm just going to stick it out until the kids are out of the house. And I've had people say that to me when the kids have been 5. That's a long time. And that's a long time for resentment and other hard emotions to show up. And make no mistake, your children feel those emotions. They can't make sense out of them, especially not if they're 5, but they feel them and they take them on. And If you're staying together for the sake of the children, guess what? They know that. And that's not their responsibility, but they feel responsible for it. So children can, like I said, it's a great motivator to improve your relationship. But staying together without making positive changes, not so much. So if you're in a relationship that isn't what you want it to be, that maybe you're one of those people who said, well, we've got to stay together, regardless of the quality of the relationship, I'm going to invite you to maybe reconsider that and maybe reach out and see what can be made better. Because the truth of the matter is, most things can be made better. And there are statistics that show that for couples who stay the course, um, it does get better. And sometimes that's because it's a situational thing that's going on. Um, but sometimes it's actually that we don't have the skills. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. No one has to take a relationship 101 class, and everybody should, because there are things that you can learn. And that doesn't, and again, if you didn't have a good example, and we're now on second and third generation divorces, so a lot of us, myself included, did not have a good example of a good marriage. And so instead of, trying to do it on your own and trying to figure out, because guess what, those habits, those messages, those experiences are inside of you. And even if you swear, because I've heard people who've come out of abusive relationships, and I mean, abusive families, and they swear to God they're never going to do it, but then they do because that's what they were taught. My client who raged, that's what he was taught. And once he stopped raging, everything got better. His relationship with his kids, his relationship with his wife, his relationship with himself got better because he learned a different way. And so that's available to you, but you have to be willing to open yourself up to it. Because, like I said, we're not taught these things. Everybody thinks relationships are natural, and up to a point they are, but every relationship, romantic relationship you've been in before this one, has ended. So, how are you going to make this one work with the same tools? So you need more tools, and that's what I help people get. So if you're interested and you want to learn to not just have a long marriage, but a good marriage, then I invite you to get in touch with me. You can send me put a direct message to me on Facebook. You can put a comment down below in the comment section. You can send me an email at leslie@foundationscoachingnc.com. And you don't, the only thing, I quote Dr. Phil, the only thing worse than being in a not great relationship for 5 years is being in a not great relationship for 5 years in one day. And most relationships don't have to end, but they could probably stand some fine tuning. So please feel free to follow me, subscribe on this channel, follow me on my social media. And if you want to get in touch, I would love to talk with you. So until next week, stay loving.